to order. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yep.
Today's the night when we go kind of through the final recommendations that we're going to submit to the town meeting, right? So the first thing on the agenda is to approve meeting minutes of March 2nd. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the meetings?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that was easy. So the next thing on the budget is to review and vote on the recommendations on fiscal year 24 budget and town meeting. So do you want to take us through yours? Do a really nice job putting this together.
Sure. And obviously there's a representative from one budget here too, so we can, I don't know if you want to take them first, but I'll give a quick overview.
Okay. We can do that first if you want.
No, why don't I give a quick overview
Okay.
and then whatever you prefer to do.
Okay.
So I provide everybody a 4-page summary that I provided to the Board of Selectmen last night. This is probably the most difficult budget that I've actually put together in 10 years that I have been here. And so it was that for many reasons. And one of the reasons that it was so tedious is that we had not reached union compromises or agreements during by January when the budgets were due. And I had disclosed that, saying that these numbers would change over time based on those. I still can't fully disclose as to what they all are because we're still in the non-disclosure agreement a time period. We have settled with 3 unions. One is 99% settled, and the Board of Selectmen have not ratified the union contracts yet. But on page 1, I let you know that we do include what I believe all of those increases will reflect, along with what their numerical value actually is per collective bargaining agreement. I also let you know that as part of it, although I really want to fund everything, I couldn't. And the only department that was looking for more staff in town on the town side was the fire department. They were looking for 3. I couldn't afford to do it, so I put in 2. I did talk to the fire chief. He understood. He appreciated the efforts, so we were funding 2. And also, as a comparison's sake, on the town side, according to their budget, they were adding 6. I don't get involved in the specifics of the school budget. That's for them to decide. I don't get involved in the specifics.
You mean on the school side they were adding 6?
That's correct. On the budget that I presented last night, that the Board of Selectmen approved and that you will be reviewing for your recommendation, I am balancing using a 2.5% increase over last year's tax levy. You'll know that in years past, we have not always had to use the full 2.5%, but there's nothing I could do. I had to use it this year. The omnibus budget is up about 6.17%. That is all budgets. That includes the water department. That was a $2.6 million year-over-year increase request. In the major drivers after I made my adjustments was a $915,000 was an increase to the local school department, a $577,000 increase in benefits, most of which I can't control. A majority of that increase is because we pay pensions for all employees throughout the entire town, and unfortunately that's determined by whatever formula they use. And then the $232,000 increase in the fire department, mainly driven from hiring 2 new additional firefighters. So after all the modifications, the total town-side omnibus budget, excluding water, is up 6.12%. I did make the modifications to reflect all the raises and all of the other shifts that I had to make throughout the entire budgets. I did recommend that we fully fund the Finance Committee Reserve Fund at the full level that we have done over the last handful of years. And I also note that although I was recommending a 6.17% increase, I know there are some people out there that are unhappy with the modifications I made, which I heard of today. But I also heard from people today that screamed down me saying I was recommending too much money because 6% is unattainable going forward. So I got it from both sides.
Well, when you have 2.5%, sort of running it, 6% is a lot more than 2.5, so.
All I can tell you is a fun day.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that said, it's my recommendation, because I am legitimately and sincerely trying to fund all departments in the entire town to the best that we can, but I'm also noting that increase, that it's not sustainable over time. We just can't run that type of increase year over year.
Mhm.
In particular to the school was the largest budget reduction that was made in the budget. The methodology is the same methodology that I've used just about every single year that I have been here. What I do is I take the town side operational expenses or budgets, I strip out the non-discretionary, such as the benefits budget, for example, and I strip out the water department, because that is not a tax side operational budget. So I stripped that out, and that meant that after my adjustments, we had just a tick under 6%, it was 5.96% increase year over year.
In
What-
all the budgets.
In all the budgets, which was a
Less
$700,000 increase, 717,000 to be exact.
Okay.
But it was a $700,000 increase in all of those department budgets. And then I took that 6% and I applied it to the school budget. Again, that's what I had done in the past, and whenever I had conversations with Patty in the past, that's what we would do.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times she would come in and say 4.3, and we'd be dropped down to 4.0, and she understood. We have not done that the last couple of years because COVID was a little bit different. And last year, we actually fully funded the entire school budget, so we didn't drop a dollar from it. Anyway, with that 6% increase year over year, there became a $915,000 increase in their budget year over year, which again, from a dollar amount, is more than all the other operational budgets combined. I note the following. I'm not happy about this recommendation. I do think that the school is facing unprecedented financial pressures, but I also note that an 8% increase year over year is going to become compounded over time, which is going to become more and more difficult to fund long term. I also note that there's about $175,000 in the total school budget that is being utilized out of federal ESSER funds. We're very fortunate to have them, and I'm glad the school is using them. But that's not included in the town side operational budget. And it's my understanding is that eventually when those funds get expire from the federal level, which is about 2 years, could be a year, could be 3, but just so used to, it's about safe. The town will have to make up that difference. So that's additional funds we'll have to make up. However,
Bringing
It's-
it up to almost $1 million, right?
that would in that case, yes.
Yeah.
But I also state, look, all I do is make recommendations. I don't vote. I didn't vote at the selectman level. I don't vote tonight, and I don't vote at town meeting. I am informing the public, as I did last night, I did to multiple people today, and I'm telling to the finance committee, is that you can fund the entire school budget. Instead of raising it 2.5%, an option is that you could raise it 3.5% instead. So I note that so that way you know. The other option is we could talk about free cash, which we'll talk about towards the end. How did I get there? On the revenue side, is that the governor's budget has been released. The state level and the local level government runs parallel with each other. The governor is the executive branch, the Board of Selectmen is the executive branch, the governor proposes a balanced budget, the House Ways and Means Committee reviews it, the Congress then, or the legislature votes on it, and they're the funding source. Same thing here, Board of Selectmen recommends a budget, you guys are the House Ways and Means Committee, because you're the financial aspect of that makes a recommendation to the full legislative body, which is town meeting, who ultimately funds it. So ultimately, it's town meeting, not me, not the Board of Selectmen, not Finance Committee, that makes that final decision. But it's your recommendation that is read at town meeting. So if you want to make changes to it, any of these budgets, that was what will be read. But based on the information we have right now, is that we have received about $1.247 million in local aid coming from the coming in the governor's budget. Most of that is classified under Chapter 70 funds. It is a formula that is used to try to use Chapter 70 or education to be able to fund at the local level. But what that also means is that out of those funds, only $44,000 is actually local receipts or local state aid. So the bulk of it is classified under Chapter 70. Intent is to help the towns fund their school systems. There's no doubt. That's exactly what the intent of it is. But there's also no doubt that $44,000 by itself can't fund an entire town's increase year over year. The other way that we look at revenue is in our local receipts. And I provide this graph because receipts unfortunately are extremely variable and non-controllable. You will see actuals in FY 20, 21, and 22, and what I used to balance last year for FY 23. And again, it goes up and down. And the main driver of the difference is our excise tax. Growth is also part of it, but when somebody buys a vehicle, you know your vehicle is worth most of that first year. We receive a higher level of excise tax, and when the economy is good, you run your excise tax bill, you know people are buying cars, because then it goes down over time. The second thing to that is enterprise. We're very fortunate that we have enterprise on West Street. So whenever they store their vehicles, they pay excise tax. I know, sounds crazy, but that's what they do. But fewer newer cars have been built. And also, there has been less demand for travel up until obviously recently. So that was one of the driving forces in 21, and what we saw this past year is that as enterprise could buy fewer cars, store fewer cars, we collect less in revenue. Can't help, hopefully next year it turns around. But again, variable. I have to be careful. I would love to just throw in $3.4 million from last year in receipts. We could balance by giving more money, but if I am wrong, I will run a deficit. And what I say that in the lower paragraph is a real world example. In FY 21, when our receipts went down $700,000 year over year, nobody tells me that's going to happen at the beginning of the budget season. Right? Remember, the budget season is now in April. We are funding a budget through next June. I can't tell you over the next 15 months exactly what we're going to receive in. So I have to be a little bit conservative, because if I'm not, in the middle of the year, if our receipts are lower, there's only one thing for us to do, and that's to reduce costs. And because our budget is 80% people, you just cut people. That's what you do. My last page, and if you don't mind, keep that page open so we can look at both the last pages at the same time. Again, I explained, and truthfully, what I'm really doing is apologizing that I am proposing a 6.1% increase, because I know to some people that is unacceptable. But that was the best that I could do in order to fund as many budgets as I could at the highest level that we could, and stay within the 2.5% levy increase. And this is how I got to my numbers. Our FY 24 increase is $2.283 million after my adjustments. We have to have an overlay account. We fund it normally at about $150,000 a year. That is a little bit variable, but we've spent this past year about $181,000. But I feel comfortable using $150,000. And then what I do is I say, okay, how much am I going to bring in year over year in additional receipts outside of? So you'll see your receipts. I'm assuming $188,000 increase over last year's estimates. So even though I estimated last year at 2.8, in order to balance, I'm using closer to 3.1. I'm making an assumption that based on what we're seeing right now, that we can make that number work. We use a Chapter 70 state aid, we use our local aid, a full 2.5% raise, and as you know, we always transfer free cash to offset the budget for the debt at $350,000. When I use all of those numbers, I balance. We also know that one of the ways that we generate income is through our growth. But I provided this graph at the bottom because we're going in the wrong direction. With rates going up, and there is some softening that is going on, I think we have all noticed that, is that we can see that we're going in the wrong direction. But again, that's just not West Bridgewater. That's across the board. So I am using $413,000. You'll see up top, increase in growth, I have 0. That means I'm assuming I'm going to generate $413,000 in new growth again this year. It's on the lower end, so I'm going to run with it because I'm going to feel like I think we can make that number work. But that's how I got to those numbers. The last thing I want to do, and I meant to put this in your packet, but we were running around, so I didn't have a chance. See this way? Sure. Again, I disclosed this last night at the selectmen's meeting because, you forget things. It just happens. So last year,
Thank you.
I could not balance the budget without taking more money from free cash. So last year, you'll see, I highlighted in yellow, is that part of the Finance Committee motion You will always see the first $350,000 because we have made a commitment that would come right off the top of free cash to lower the debt, to help out the debt, obviously, on that. But we used an additional $350,000 last year in order to balance, because we needed it.
Wow.
So you used $700,000 of it. Now, you have that option this year as well. I said this last night, and I'm advising you, because if you guys want to cover the entire school budget, in my estimation, you have two options. One is that you can raise it 3.5%. It's very simple. You don't have to even take that vote. All you do is that you agree to fully fund the entire school budget, and then at town meeting it gets approved, and then when the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Assessors, and I get together in the fall, we set the tax rate. At that point, we crunch all the numbers, we'll see that we need to raise it 3.5%, we just do it. Because we have the levy capacity to do it, because we have not always raised it 2.5% in the past. Or, we can do what we did last year, is that we can transfer $271,000 from our free cash account to cover that difference. There's no pain in that, right? The money has already been raised, there's no additional taxation. However, as I said last night, we can't keep on relying on free cash. You're not always going to be able to generate it. And to me, it's like living on a credit card. Sooner or later, yeah, it feels good. I paid all my bills. I paid to use the credit card. But sooner or later, you run out of rope. You do have it. After we fully fund all of our capital budget items that we expect to fund, we'll have about $316,000 left over for free cash. I had hoped this year that we were going to put that towards our sidewalk fund. We have been funding it at $150. As the town grows and there's more children, there's been more pressures for sidewalks, and $150,000 doesn't go that far. But we're trying.
About 20 feet.
Yeah, I know, we're trying, we're making an earnest attempt. So I'd hoped this year to put that full $300,000 into the sidewalk fund and do $450 instead of $150. But again, it's not my decision. So if the Finance Committee would prefer to do this, you can make that recommendation here. I would have to advise the Board of Selectmen, because they will be voting on their warrant articles at their next meeting. And if the money is in this motion, then they're not going to have it to put towards the sidewalks. I know that's what they would like to do, but that vote has not taken place yet. I know I went fast, and I'm really sorry, but I was just trying to make sure I got through everything. If I missed anything, I apologize, but I think that's everything.
So let's stop there. Any questions on anything so far?
Can I ask where the free cash comes from? I forgot. How does it get raised? Like, how did you get the 316 that you now have plus the 350? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so free cash is generated in two ways. During a fiscal year, hopefully we bring in more money than we had thought we were going to bring in. So there's always this misnomer that whenever, if we bring in, say there's more people that move in town, we get more excise tax, that we spend it. Well, we didn't spend it. If we brought in more money than we originally thought, that goes into an account and it gets certified by the Department of Revenue, and that's excess cash the next year that we can spend how we see fit. And the second way it's generated is when budgets are not entirely spent.
Okay.
So there are some budgets in town that spend their entire budget year after year after year. There's not a dollar left. There are some budgets that do not always spend their entire budget.
And that comes back.
And that comes back.
Yeah.
And it can't be spent for anything outside of that budget. And I'm going to give you an example, again, just in full transparency. Our insurance is relatively cheap for this town. We only spend a couple $100,000. All right? You're insuring over $100 million worth of buildings and millions of dollars worth of cars. I have high deductibles. So if we don't have big claims, we normally generate about $50,000 or $60,000 of surplus in that account. But if I have a couple of claims, I have some deductible as high as $25,000, just to keep the expense, because we don't have a lot of claims. So I have to have the money in that account. But historically, we have not used it all, so that money falls back to free cash, and we have it the following year to spend however town meeting chooses to spend it.
Well, that's the money we use for a lot of times for the capital budget items
100%.
and things like that.
That is correct. That is entirely correct. So when I got here, we financed everything, including police cars. And I was like, why are you paying debt on $40,000? So what we've done is that we really pay attention to our budgets, and then at the end, when that free cash gets certified, my recommendation to the board, as long as we are able, so we always pay cash to lower our debt, and we use that cash to purchase capital items. And for
Okay.
example, the school department is here, and one of their capital items was touchscreens. It's almost $100,000, but it's something that we need. It's basically what I found as a new blackboard. But we need
No more
those.
races.
And because we have that free cash, we can now buy them, and it's an option, it's something
Right.
that they need. So that's how we do it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Other questions on the information so far?
I'll probably ask the same question next year, so.
That's okay.
What if we're at 6% next year? I mean, we can't sustain 6% period, right?
You can
It's
sustain,
difficult.
you can sustain 6% as long as we continue to get vast increases in state aid, which is not always gonna happen.
Right,
And as long as you continue to have growth, which is not always gonna happen.
right.
But if looking in a crystal ball, if those continue, you're good. If they don't continue, you're not good.
So,
Mm.
I follow you.
Okay. I see you all from the school department or the school board. Did you want to say something before we start digging into the weeds here?
Sure. Based up the numbers first, I just wanted to clarify, just a couple of numbers first and then we'll see. But over the past 2 years, our increases have been an average 5.2%. Prior to that, the prior 4 years are 4.4%. So, you know, we've looked over the past 2 years at a 0.8% increase during our most difficult times. This year, we're asking for 7.78%. Again, that's partly due to the needs, well, it's actually all due to our needs, but it's also due to, this is year 3 of 6 of the Student Opportunity Act being fully funded by the state. That's granted us over $1.2 million in Chapter 70 that is designated for the school system. And I think we're facing a lot of uphill battle with our population. The town has allowed unprecedented growth in town with apartments and homes that will, in the near future, bring us up to about 10,000 residents in town. And that's been stated before. That's going to dramatically affect our schools as well. So the budget we've presented, the school committee's budget is a needs-based. It's what we need within the town to fund our schools, for our students and our staff.
So I just wanted to say first, Dave, thank you for what you do in trying to juggle all these balls and balance all these different interests for all the different departments for the town. Now that being said, school departments are different in the eyes of Massachusetts state law. They're given the authority to manage and develop their own budgets, and it's, in the interest of keeping Massachusetts the state with the best schools that they do that. So in developing this budget, we're not looking for Cadillac options. We're not looking for the biggest and brightest of anything. We're trying to do what we need to provide the services that are necessary for our population. And as Mark mentioned, our population is changing to one where nearly 1 in 3 kids have higher needs. So we do need to provide the services that those kids need, and it's getting a little more expensive right now. I don't think we're gonna see an increase in the number of students that have that higher need every year. That's something that's a little bit anomalous right now. So that probably will level out at some point. But for right now, the budget that we've developed is really the budget that we need. And I would strongly recommend that we present that budget to the people of the town to vote on that, without looking at individual lines, just trying to chop a number off of our budget. It's kind of an indiscriminate cut, and it's really difficult to decide where that's gonna come from. Whose needs are gonna get cut? It's really not a position that we wanna be in.
Anything else?
I know that we've talked a lot about Chapter 70, we've talked about PPE, we've talked about all sorts of metrics. So I'm not going to revisit that again, but I do want to stress that this budget was built, as was said by both Mr. Schmier and Mr. Bodwell, with the needs of the students in mind. And I think that when we look at Chapter 70 funds, and we look at what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has identified as what we need, we've asked for exactly that. And if you back out that Chapter 70 funding, we're asking for essentially level funded from the previous year. We're not asking for more town appropriation when you back out that Chapter 70 funding. So we're just asking that we get the education aid that the state has determined that we need. That we agree we need, based on our own measurements, based on our students, but the state identifies that as well. And so that's what we put to you.
And that's consistent from last year when our increase we asked for, and thankfully received at 5.42%. That was a $784,000 increase, and the state Chapter 70 was $744,000. So it was just under $40,000 of new money because of the increase in Chapter 70 that year as well.
So,
Is it fair to say that, you know, the role of Finance Committee is representing the taxpayers? We're trying to act as a taxpayer, saying, do I want to spend this much money? We haven't talked water. I mean, once you add a new $14 million roughly, people say, well, that's the water department. In effect, that's a tax. So not only is it a tax, tax on this side, but your water bill is gonna go up $200-300. So from a taxpayer's viewpoint, it's unsustainable. We can't do that. So they're hard things to do. I mean, again, I'm coming from a business background where this happens all the time. You only have so much revenue and you make it work. And it works fine. I mean, things always work out fine. So there's only so much we can generate.
yeah, agree. So the Chapter 70 funds, the 1.2 million, if we add those to the school budget this year, next year, are we guaranteed to get that money?
So I'll say my piece, and then I know Mr. Gagnon
Yeah,
has
that's a misnomer.
a follow-up. There is, yes. So the districts will be held harmless. So we are guaranteed to receive the amount that we received last year. We may not receive a nickel more, but what we receive this year will follow us to next year.
Look, I'm fine with that statement.
Oh, okay. I know less that you had
Well,
some
because I
exception, yeah.
it's funny,
Yeah.
Robin, I'm afraid to say this, but I went out last night and I kept on thinking of our conversation, so I hate to admit that. Because I think we were actually saying the same thing,
Yeah.
but we were coming from different angles. So I would fully agree, and I think I even said something about this, the fact that I do expect that we are that's gonna be our new baseline, right? But let's assume state aid next year goes up 4%. Well, $7 million times 4% is $280,000. You're not gonna come in with a $280,000 increase. You're gonna come in with another 900, 1 million. So that is the new baseline, so I think Rob and I are saying the same thing,
Yeah.
that's a new baseline. But a $1.2 million increase every single year going forward is not what we're going to see. We're really seeing, because the truth of the matter is, although Mark is correct that this is the third year it's being funded, the legislature the first year didn't follow the law. They passed it, but they didn't follow it. It took 2 fiscal years before they started putting money in, and now they're finally getting to the point where they're really trying to fund it entirely. So we're seeing that bump. We're seeing that benefit. So there is a new baseline. My concern is that on that baseline is that we won't see the same percentage increases going forward.
Yeah.
And so, and if the school department, I'm not saying they're doing it, but I'm just kind of listening to a little bit what Mark said. The school department can't build a budget based on the increase of the Chapter 70. And I wouldn't want them to, because you have needs. And so there are some years, there might only be a $250,000 increase in Chapter 70. And I'm not gonna sit here and say you only get $250. I wouldn't do that. But that also means if you get 1.2 million, doesn't mean you get the full 1.2 million. I wanna fund you with what you need. Now, I don't know what you need as well as you do. I'm never, ever gonna take that position. But I have to work within the scope of the authority that I have. Nobody has bestowed on me the authority to recommend a more than 2.5% increase. And nobody has bestowed on me the authority to transfer more from free cash than is done in the past. I don't have the power. You guys do. Town meeting does. The Board of Selectmen, I said it multiple times last night, they didn't direct me. I only can act within the scope of my authority. I'm just giving recommendations, I'm giving you guys options. But to answer Robin's question, we are on the same page that we should have a new baseline. But their increases, you're now gonna be at, on the town side, what, 17 million? So a 5% increase on that is gonna be $900,000. A 3% next year or 4% is only gonna be a third of that increase on chapter 70. And that's why I kept on saying last night, and I'm saying it tonight, because this is nothing, there's no personality involved. It's just math.
Yeah.
It's just math.
Yeah. Numbers do the talking.
And that's why I say, if you want to fund it, fund it. I have no doubt that the needs are there. But sooner or later, you're going to run out of free cash. Sooner or later, you're not going to get the vast increases on
And
chapter
what are you
70.
gonna cut?
Sooner or later, you're not going to have growth. And then you're going to be cutting into real, you're going to make real hard decisions. And look, I didn't want to tell the fire chief he can't have 3 new people.
That's right,
He has a ton of calls. This
Mm.
town is growing. I wouldn't use the same words that Mark said, because Mark said that the town has allowed the growth. I mean, you know what? You own land. You want to build, you build. Right? There's nothing I can
I
do.
mean, that's-
We have to permit it. They have to comply. They have to do certain things, all those things. But we don't go out and advocate and say, hey, let's go buy some apartments, build some
And we
apartments.
can't stop some of it.
That's my
but,
only point. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
the fire department is busier. And they have historically only run with 4 people on, and they have the same pressures from the state as the school does, where now they have to have 2 people to a truck, 2 people to a, they can't just run one
It's
person.
more about safety
So,
there too.
um,
We don't want somebody to die.
So that
Run
building is
into a
empty
fire.
a lot, and that's why we eventually need to hire some more staff. And I had to tell them, no, I couldn't fully fund it. And those are hard decisions. It stinks. I didn't want to say it.
When I met
And I don't
with
want to say this to because I like Mark, and I didn't like calling him the other morning.
Mark.
I didn't want to call him, but I made the call.
Sue, but we do have 6 positions that you're trying to add, so it's not like you'd have to lay people
That's-
I'm
off.
not really
right?
sure where the
Clarify that.
6 came from. I mean, we've added staff, the way that we've added staff, some is through grants, through ESSER, so I'm not sure where the metric with 6 came from. I know for next year, for new positions, we're adding the sub-separate program at the Roselle. We're adding a teacher and an instructional assistant. We're adding, the social worker is coming, one of them's coming out of ESSER and going in. So the number of positions, and that's the list I gave during the presentation. It listed a number of different staff that have been added or increased. Special education teachers have been increased from 0.5 to 1.0. We've added a reading specialist, we've added a social worker, we've added a pre-K teacher, part-time, half-time pre-K assistant, and we've added some one-on-ones for some of our most neediest students. So we've added staff for sure over the past couple of years.
So if I may, because I just want there to be facts. So as part of the budget, every department is required to turn in basically a payroll slip. And they turn in, so I know every single employee in town on the town side. I know their staff, and that's why I can definitively tell you whether we're hiring people or not. The school is too big. Again, they have authority as a school committee. I really don't, it doesn't really matter to me how many 3rd grade teachers there are, right? It doesn't matter to me. So what they do is they provide just a cover sheet, and that cover sheet shows the equivalent of FTEs. So all they do is they just track it. So year over year it was up 5.98, say 6. Whether that means that you laid 2 off and added 3, whether you had 17 halves, none of that mattered, and I don't ask those questions. All I'm using is that bottom line metric provided from the school department year over year.
And I would say, yeah, that's absolutely,
Yeah, I
true. I
think
mean, that's, we're not debating the 6, it's just how those 6 kind of added up.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's not, we haven't hired 6 new bodies. It's a couple of bodies,
Yeah.
but it's additional time. And so one of the things that we've spoken about in our presentation in the past is EL teachers. So again, that correlates directly to Chapter 70. Those funds are coming in because EL students require greater resources. So that FTE, that time is increased. And so I think, I really don't want to get in any comparison with other departments because we are so much bigger. I mean, we have, 200 employees? And so if we're talking about 6 the equivalent of 6 employees in a 200 employee budget. I mean, it's
We're
a,
talking
that's a,
maintenance, custodial.
Right.
yeah, that's,
But it still
Cafeteria
has
workers.
an
Still a
impact to
big
the
number.
town budget,
Well, of course
because
it does.
we're covering the, I believe, the health bills,
Yeah.
all the
Health
benefits,
benefits.
the town covers all that stuff
Of
too.
course.
For all
So-
departments,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, all departments, yeah.
David, you mentioned the legislature finally coming through and fully funding something that they mandated. There's more good news in that regard, that they're increasing the funding in circuit breaker and in reimbursement for transportation this year. So we'll likely get more money back to West Bridgewater from the state.
Yeah,
Those
which obviously
justices.
you'll see the following year, but you're entirely correct that it looks like that's going to, again, in the governor's budget.
Yeah.
We'll see how it makes it through, but you're entirely correct.
Yeah, our Massachusetts Association of School Committees legislative rep was very positive on the way he thinks things are moving with the budget through the legislature.
Yeah, no, I would suspect, based on what we've been briefed, that we will see the bulk of it, if not all of it, funded, maybe even a little bit more. But I agree with you. I don't think that there will be a lot of adverse impact on the governor's budget at the legislative level.
I do also just want to clarify, you didn't imply this at all, but I just want to clarify, our budget increased by that 1.2 million. When we found out about Chapter 70 being 1.2 million, it was already built. And we said, wow, we're fortunate that this is basically, what did MAS see, a bow, a present with a big bow on top.
Yeah.
So we did not build the budget based on Chapter 70. It just happens that our budget was built based on needs, and Chapter 70 funding was based on needs, so.
So ESSER has always concerned me, I mean, from the time we started getting it, because we knew it was going to run out, but we're
Right.
spending it as well we should, because we got it. It's gonna run out, right? I mean, that's
Through
that's
a thing in
175.
FY20, probably FY25.
Yeah,
But it's always been, it's a dangerous slippery slope to be on when you're adding staff to any kind of grant, because when the
Yeah.
grant runs out,
Yeah,
then you've got decisions to make, so that is always very difficult. And we would much rather have put that into other things
Yeah.
rather than people, but unfortunately, the need was there for the staff.
yeah.
So that,
Well, I
I think,
sat with the chief too, the fire chief, for an hour and a half, and I listened to him very carefully, because I thought 3 people was a huge jump. But in the end, he said, this is what I need, and I hear that word all the time, what we need. Every department needs, they're not wants. The chief said, this isn't a want, this is a need. And he's not gonna get 3 people, he's not gonna get them.
Yeah.
2,
Well, potentially, right?
yeah.
Can I ask one question? Has ELA jumped again since we last met? Does anybody know? Mark,
The number of our EL students,
student-wise, yeah, because I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought at the last meeting that you guys came to, ELA was up close between 50 and 60 kids.
yes, when we met, I think that week, we had 5 students.
I heard that there's been a couple more come in since then.
There have. I don't have
And
the
they're coming
exact
in
number.
not, I hate to interrupt you, they're not coming in at the higher levels because, as we're all aware, unfortunately, my wife works with you guys, or fortunately.
We think fortunately, but that's okay.
But it's my understanding to her, let's all joking aside, my wife hates it when I bring her up. She told me that there's actually been 2 more at her level, which kind of scares me because, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, once they're in, now we have to teach them how to learn English at that level, which is very difficult, and it makes it very difficult for those teachers to actually deal with them on a daily basis because they just don't listen, because they don't understand. Not because they don't want to, it's just, that atmosphere that's created. And I have other reasons what I think is wrong, but regardless, at the rate we're going, has anybody projected what the possibility of this, before we know it, is gonna reach 100?
Well, our numbers have increased. We've shown that. We've had, new students come into the elementary levels. And although it is, most of the students are coming in have, limited or no English, but the good news is when they do come in at that lower level, their language acquisition skills, they're acquiring language much more rapidly than they are. It's usually if they come into the high school level, that's when we see the biggest problem because they're still required to take and pass MCAS. even if they're in
That's
their early
crazy.
years. So when they come at the elementary level, we see massive growth in a very short amount of time. So, but the flip side is it takes resources, and it takes, 90 minutes a day of instruction that needs to be dedicated for each of these students, so we can group them and so forth. But it's difficult, but we do what we do with our qualified staff.
Have you increased your instructors in each building in reference to this, or are we still at a limited amount and one person's running around like a chicken with their head cut off?
Right now, we have next year we'll have two full-time. We have 1.7 right now at the middle senior high school and 2 at the elementary level. And that's an increase from the past few years due to the needs.
All right, so I guess, should we go through your changes, well, not your changes, but the changes that you're recommending that we discuss?
Yeah, I mean, this here, I'd rather not go through budget by budget. I'd rather
Okay.
just give you an overview, and if you guys have questions.
Okay.
But basically, what I had to do is I did the following. As contracts were signed, you'll see additions into those budgets. As positions were moved, or items were, or the budgets were cut, you see reductions in those budgets.
So is it fair to say that most of these additions are just related to the estimate we made for the contract that I think we had 2% or something in there?
That is correct.
And
The
where
difference-
we think it's gonna eventually land, or is sort of almost landed?
That is correct.
Okay. And then some of the there was a couple of bigger buckets, really just moved buckets, right?
Some of them moved, some of them were other cuts. Again, we rate out our health insurance on an annual basis to try to get the best price. We were able to actually save 2% on that, so I put that as a reduction.
That's unusual.
We converted our lights to LED lights. We're hoping to see a full year's reflection of that, because we've been going over budget on that. Instead of reflecting last year's budget, I actually reduced it, because I'm hoping that we're gonna see a difference, because, again, I'm trying to stay within the 2.5%.
Yeah.
And so I made that reduction. Maybe I'm wrong, but, it's a hope.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about the fire department already.
Yeah.
And then most of the others are just either moving staff or contractual increases.
So on the education, why does it say it's a reduction of 271?
Because I went from the increase of 7.78% to
Okay.
6%.
To 6%.
And-
So
I see,
it's not a reduction year over year, it's a reduction in what the request
That
is
is
this
I
year.
see, okay, all right.
Yeah, all of these are an adjustment to what the request was, not to last
Okay.
year's budget.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you so
So
much.
without going too far ahead, so if you look at the next page on education line,
Mhm.
the plus or minus 915,000.
I'm sorry? Say it again?
Look at line 33,000 for education.
3,000?
And look
Yeah.
at the third column from the right,
Yep,
it says 915.
yep.
Yeah.
So is that what the gap is, or is it?
No, $915,000 will be their net increase year over year.
Got
So
it.
their request was just under 1.2 million.
Got it.
And after I reduced that request by
I see.
271,000, the net increase is 915,000.
I see,
Thank you.
thank you.
So the options we have in terms of, well, I guess really both the fire department position, 3 versus 2, and the school department is to use free cash or to increase the property taxes by 3.5%, I think is what I heard. Is that correct?
It is, but the only thing I would ask, and again, it's up to the committee, I would ask where the Board of Selectmen has jurisdiction over the fire department.
Yep,
The fire chief in that board,
yep,
their appointing authority was comfortable at the 2.
they were,
I would ask
okay,
you to stay at the 2.
okay,
The school committee is not comfortable with what the difference was in the request.
got it,
So if you're gonna make a modification, obviously you can make it to the fire department, you have
Yep.
that flexibility.
right,
But there seems to be consensus on that,
okay.
so
Fair enough.
I wouldn't focus as much on that.
So
Okay.
he thinks he can live with the 2
That's what he
for
says.
now, okay,
Mhm.
So how are we gonna
yeah, I'm trying to
vote
remember
of
how
the
we did
entire
this.
budget, or?
Did Do we do it line by line, or?
No, we
No.
I can't remember what we did last year.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel comfortable with, you can say moderator 788 and, I mean, or you can look at it and say four of you have, say, I only want to talk about these 4 budgets. The assumption is there's no discussion about the others, and you talk about those 4.
Okay.
Take a vote on those 4,
Okay.
and then if
You're
they're.
kind of the way they do it at town meeting.
Exactly,
Yeah, I like that.
exactly.
Okay.
So,
Could-
I'm gonna look to you folks to say, which ones do you wanna chat about?
Well, I'd like to chat about the school one, of course.
Okay.
Because, but I guess if the fire department's comfortable for this year with not hiring an extra staff and going with the 2, I'm okay with not talking about that one if they're okay. But I guess that would be my biggest one
Okay,
of how we address that with the increase if we're going to.
okay. And Scott, anything that you wanna focus on besides the school one?
Other than the school, just maybe the benefits, do you think you're comfortable with a 5 to 7, I'd like to talk about that.
Okay, and then Jim,
Was
did
there
you
any
wanna?
discussion
I wanted to
about
ask
the
David
water?
about-
Is the water doing
Did
anything?
you look at the highway department budget again?
I did.
And I know that when I looked at it, there were 3 or 4 lines, maybe even 5 lines that gone up maybe close to 100%. And Chris explained that, but is there any consideration of looking there to see if it's a total necessity or I know that they're in trouble over there, but everybody's in trouble. So,
I have to
I
say,
mean-
they never asked for money, so did you have a discussion with Chris about this?
I did, so 2
Is that
items
a
on it.
vehicle?
No.
no, this was equipment.
2 items on it, exactly. It was usually equipment or maintenance of equipment.
Okay.
One is that Chris historically has never actually had increases in those lines.
Okay.
And many times he's gone over and then he had a balance, or a couple of years you guys did a transfer.
Yeah, we did
And even though sometimes they were 100% increase, they were a little like a 2,000 budget going to 4.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
try
good.
not to
Yeah.
nitpick.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
try, we raise at 2.5%, there's rounding. So
Mhm.
we're not gonna be like off by $1,888 on a $40 million budget.
Mhm.
But yes, you are correct, there were some large increases, but for example, the moderator, it's up 34%.
Yeah.
But it's $200. You know, so I didn't spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
And then in discussions with Chris, it's verifiably accurate that he's gone over those lines. And,
Yeah, I know.
And
Yep.
so we have to fund him, and the cars have to work.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we go over, Jan,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the planner inspectional services, right? Obviously, there's been some shifts in personnel and things like that.
Mhm.
Can we
Which line
just,
is that?
uh, 1230?
12:30.
Can we just understand what the net is between all the departments on that?
Okay.
Oh,
Mo,
I know what that is.
Mo,
yeah.
did you want to, I'm just kind of highlighting which ones we want to chat more about. Anything
I'm all
else?
set.
Okay. Cheryl,
That's the-
anything good you want to call up?
that's
Okay.
that new
All right, so
position.
let's start with the planner inspectional services. Jeff, what do you,
Well, I know there's been some personnel shifts and rearrangements. I'm assuming the
Yeah.
80,000 coming out of the building inspector
Mhm.
is a shift in person. So at the end of the day, it's obviously not a $279,000 increase,
Mhm.
as much as the building inspector's not 80,000 less, right? So, but just what is the net?
It's also-
yeah, so
On
that
that.
increase, because they didn't have a budget in that line last year, we didn't have a
Mhm.
planner, so that's why it looks that
Yeah,
way it does,
right.
right?
But this is showing some of the adjustments that I've made, so when we did the budget, the request is that we are now going to have the secretarial staff
Right.
to the
Mhm.
Board of Health,
Yep.
the Building Department, and the Conservation Commission all answer to the planner
Mhm.
who's in charge of that consolidated department.
Yeah.
We think we can drive some efficiencies and some customer service with that.
Hmm.
When the budgets came in, the Conservation Commission removed their secretary, but the Board of Health and the Building Department did not. So that's
Oh.
about say $65,000 for each one of them got moved over.
Yeah.
The Building Department, I also cut a couple of small little stipend increases. Excuse me, there were items that the selectmen didn't want to fund. But the difference, so that's why you'll see some negatives.
And that's what I guess what I was asking, like,
Exactly.
which negatives pertain to that
So the
positive?
Board of Health, you'll see $63,000 as a negative.
Mhm.
And in the building inspector, you see 80,000, the bulk of that is just moving.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Is it the Conservation
Con-
the
Commission?
conservation is already down 47,000. So on this sheet, these are net numbers, If you look at my sheet, it says reduction in addition, you can actually see the specific movement that I made. So
Okay.
the building inspector, for example, the reduction is exactly 65,470.
Yeah.
That was moved into the planning because that's a person.
Okay,
The Board of Health
47.
47.
is 47,270. That was
Mhm.
moved into the Board of Health. The Conservation Commission budget on the adjustment sheet is 0 because they had already moved the
They had-
secretary. for
Oh,
Budget.
gotcha, gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
lower
Yeah,
budget.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's why I say this budget was extremely tedious
Yeah,
for me to go through, literally line by line, person by person,
yeah.
when I did it.
But we're
You-
taking $110,000 out of other line items up into that line.
That is correct. So that is a net 0.
Okay,
So are you good with that?
yes.
Okay, anybody else have questions on that one?
That makes sense.
Okay. Let's, I guess, leave education for last. The DPW, did you get everything you wanted? You're okay with that?
Yeah.
And then the benefits?
Yeah. I noticed that there was, is that the increase or decrease?
So, on the adjustment sheet, there's a decrease of $75,000.
Okay.
And that is because when, in January, we were being forecasted with a 7% increase in our health insurance,
Yeah.
but when then it got rated, it came in at
Oh,
5%
nice.
increase.
Okay.
So that's actual, I'm not guessing.
Okay.
So I feel comfortable reducing that by 75,000.
All right. Just
Because your
thinking
initial,
age and population and just making sure we're not taking it from something that you're gonna need type of deal, that's all. Okay,
No,
Appreciate
yeah.
we could come back later.
well, because the initial thing that you brought to the board, to the finance committee was estimating a bigger increase than it ended up coming.
And it
Is
came in
essentially what
at
we're
5.
saying.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
Can you forecast in a rough way, or do you forecast benefits going forward? Are you able to do that? 'Cause what was
So-
577, was that a big jump over?
It is a bigger jump. So I normally can forecast the bulk of it because it's retirement.
Yes.
And the
Mhm.
retirement has always been established at 8.25% increase every year until 2033,
We fund it,
which is
yeah.
when it's supposed to be fully funded. However, this past year, according to the actuarial tables, they had losses, and as a result, they had to make up for those losses. So that's why they increased that line on us at 12.5%.
Those were investment losses, I
Those are
assume.
investment,
Yeah.
like they take the money and it's investment
Mm.
losses.
Don't the old stock
So,
market.
the point, exactly, so the point
I
is,
had one.
can I forecast that? No. If I could forecast it, I wouldn't know you, because I'd be playing in the stock
Yeah,
market.
yeah, right,
Right.
exactly, exactly. But they make up for the losses.
They did this past year.
That's interesting. Of course,
Um,
it's I guess they have to, right?
Look, the truth, and I didn't want to go down this rabbit hole, but
No.
since you brought it up, I'm a little frustrated about that, because in 2018, 2019, a lot of people saw vast increases in their 401Ks, because you saw
Yeah.
big
Correct.
increases.
Huge.
And
Correct.
we
They
got
didn't
hit
go
at
down,
8.
right.
Correct.
Yeah,
So I don't understand why they had to make up for
Right.
it.
yeah.
But I am not on that committee. It's a regional committee. I'm not on that committee, and we don't get to make that decision. And it's a countywide decision based on their guidance from the state.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, and please don't get mad at me, there's only so many people you can argue with.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't take on that
Yeah.
argument.
No, I get
And
it.
in the end, I couldn't change it even if I wanted to yell at it.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you this, they're starting the, construction on the Lincoln Street project, and the warehouse. Do we anticipate any change in tax revenue because of that will help with this, or
Yes, but not in this year.
not in this year?
Yeah, so assessments are always made, if, like, for example, if you do an abatement, is always made on the January of the preceding year. So it won't be complete, or we won't be able to get a full tax record of it as of
Okay.
January of 2024. It'll be January of 2025, which will have a net impact of the following fiscal year.
Okay.
We went to town, and we got a TIF agreement.
Yes.
The anticipated
remember that.
incremental tax revenue on that
Right.
is a total of $2 million. However, I gotta break that down for you so you know it, because I'm counting on it in the future.
Yeah.
About 1 million of it is property tax. We are providing a 5-year 50% TIF agreement to help us pay for all of that construction. So in theory, $500,000 a year will be generated for about 5 years. After that, we'll get the full and fair at that point. I'm also hoping and anticipating about $1 million a year of personal property taxes that through our negotiations is not subject to the pilot agreement. So we will receive all of that.
So you get all this
But
stuff
that
on.
also means that it has to be occupied.
Right,
So-
they have to have a copy machine, and they have to have a,
Well, it also has to have a vendor.
vendor.
And so I can definitively tell you that when they started this process and we were in a different economy, they had multiple hands all reaching out to them, trying to get in there. But through all the delays, those people have gone elsewhere. And obviously, there is some softening in the commercial side market. So when they are complete in, say, 12 to 18 months, we'll see if they can, do they get a quarter of it filled, a whole of it filled? And so you're aware that they're gonna provide themselves full flexibility on it, because they don't wanna be long-term owners of the property. Is that all they're doing is building a shell. So that way, if, say, Amazon wants to go in there and they need 40,000 square feet,
Then-
Amazon will
then
go
they do
in
the
and
build.
they will build
Yeah.
40,000 square feet to their specificity. They will then rent that space and market the rest of it. But obviously, that's a lot of moving parts going forward.
Yeah.
And until those items are addressed, I won't see any dollars on that.
Okay, so
We
we
probably
can't,
won't see as much as they continue to raise rates to slow this economy down.
Mm.
We're not gonna see a huge jump in, not for a few years, I don't think.
so, all of that said, what does this committee wanna recommend to the town in terms of this school budget request?
Well, I think we vote on the whole budget.
Yeah, but we wanted to talk a little
I
bit
think-
about.
Oh, back
the-
up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think we should leave the school budget up to the town as to whether or not they want to fund it.
Well,
Well,
we can do that, but
It's
if
gonna
our job
happen
is to
anyway.
make a
Like
recommendation.
I know that, but
And they can
we leave
listen
it
or not
to the
listen.
town at the line it's at,
Uh,
prior to our deduction,
Well, I
to
would
whether
say-
they want to budget
Jim,
it or
just
not.
We
to
need to make a
clarify, what
recommendation.
number?
Which number?
Yeah.
The number they came in at.
Yeah.
What is that?
The 1.2 or the 950, just to,
Yeah, did you?
1.2? The 1.2.
186.
I would say.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, 1.1.
the higher number.
Right.
I know.
Right, so I mean, personally, I've heard it and I've seen it and I know that there's great needs. I'm not gonna go through each and every line, but I do think we should fully fund it, but I'd like to see it come out of the free cash, even though it's not the thing we're gonna do forever and ever, but it's for this year, cause I don't wanna see the increase of 3 point
Yeah,
whatever, so
I'm-
that's my suggestion.
yeah, and I'm curious, do we have stats on the population in this town of older people? Like, what, do we know that? Because if you took a 1% increase on somebody's tax, that'd be a lot. I agree with, Scott. I agree that we should fund it, but I do not want to see people's taxes go up this year. I think what people are doing with a lot right now. And, for
And
this
they have a
year,
lot
I don't want to
more,
see
too.
that.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, even if we take that money out of free cash, if we're still talking a 2.5%.
2.5
Correct.
increase, yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
2.5 is the limit.
Yeah, that's okay. I rather,
2.5
I don't want to
and
see a
3.5.
3.5 increase on
3.5.
people right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're going up in taxes the most we can go up,
Yeah.
Yep,
you know,
max.
without tapping into Prop 2.5.
Yeah.
I'm for recommending we accept the budget as it's written.
On,
With the reduction, the 915.
reduction.
Okay.
I'm with Mo. I just think in this economy and, you know, obviously I've got some other things going on. We're preaching fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think we bring it to town. I think our recommendation should be, you know, the 915 increase.
Mhm.
And,
It's a good size increase.
It is.
and, you know, town meeting's town meeting.
And it's still
Anything can happen at town meeting.
915,000.
Mm-hmm. True.
No, it's a 6% increase in an economy
Yeah.
that's pretty unstable right now, and
Yeah, I'm kind of
know.
worried about a recession myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one thing we didn't talk about at
But
all.
again, we're
about
recommending,
projected
remember?
Exactly.
revenues
still up to
coming
the
from the state
town,
going to
but-
the future.
So
If
So
we
you
have
have
a
two of us
recession,
that
we're not
say
gonna
keep
get.
it, you have two that says
I mean, the
not,
ESSER
so you
funds will
guys
get, but we
need
won't
to-
get the.
Yeah, and I mean, and the town did decide on, they weren't, I mean, they do know what they want. They didn't want the complex at this point. And so, I mean, either way, but what do you guys think? Come on, put your cards on the table.
It's down to 3.
So, I'm sorry, so you were saying that you're worried about revenues in the future?
I am.
Mm.
I think it's a serious worry. I mean,
Mm.
it's only recently that the state has had a surplus and actually paid money back to the taxpayers. That's never happened before, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And the state's not going to maintain being flush if people can't pay their, they don't have a job, they're
Yeah.
not going to have income.
Right.
Mhm.
They don't pay income tax.
Mhm.
I don't mean to be a
No.
a doomsayer, but we have cycles in our economy, and
We
we've
have
just
to be
come off a boom.
realists. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I also think from a town perspective, I mean, we're looking, I think the capital budget was adjusted to what, just the 4 million on the water this year?
Yes.
But there was another 10, potentially on the books, and I'm
Asked
sure
for.
that's gonna come up
One I
again.
said no to.
Yeah, the one you said no to got removed.
In effect, that's a tax.
You know, and you bring that on, and then we're talking about a new school in the future,
Mhm.
and that's additional tax. So
Yeah.
I think,
Yep.
again, not that I don't believe in what the schools do, and I think they do a fantastic job at what they do. But I think to the point, we can't sustain this growth, especially looking ahead at the large expenses we have coming up. So,
Could somebody do me a favor, only because I want to confirm my work? Can somebody use that calculator and do a one calculation for me?
Yeah.
I shut off my phone, so whoever can get to this first. Sorry.
Good.
What do you got?
So 41, 897, 577, plus 271, 050.
42, 168, 627?
All right, so that's what I have.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing is that the only adjustment that you potentially are really voting on is on the educational budget.
Mm-hmm.
So my recommendation is that on your sheet, you see a number, the total of 41, 897, 577.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody either takes a motion, puts a motion to get that, and you take a vote, or somebody puts a motion to the 42, 168, 627, and then you take a vote on that. It's whoever wants to make that motion, or which motion first, but you take a vote, and that's how you know how the
Okay.
committee is voting.
Okay.
David,
So-
sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead.
But, so, like I said, you have 2 on the floor that says, keep it as is, you have 2 that's not, so you have 3.
Take a
So
vote.
why do we just vote as a group and go with what they say?
What's your motion?
Oh, again, I'm not motioning anything, I'm asking kind of as we're doing this, right? You got 2 and 2, you got 3 that haven't said what they wanted to do. So my thought would be, whatever our vote is as a group is how we would move forward.
Well, typically what we do is somebody makes a motion, says, I'll make a motion to, the
Oh.
budget at 42, whatever. And then you vote and you
Ah.
say, 6 to 2.
Oh, okay, I got it,
6
I got
to
it.
2,
Alright.
they have to have
5 to
something
6.
to
Got it,
vote
got it.
on.
So-
Or you make a motion that says, I want to
Alright.
fund it at the 41.8, which is what was
So-
I see.
recommended by the,
Alright.
by the
Got it.
Board of
I got it.
Selectmen,
I got it,
right?
thank you.
And the truth of the matter is, it's really your choice, because I did it, because it sounds like that's the only budget adjustment.
Yeah.
You could, if you want to make multiple votes, you could look at your educational budget. You'll see the department request is
Yeah.
16,445,522, and the
Mhm.
adjustment is 16,174. So you could take a motion on one of those, and then after you determine which passes, then you would then adjust the bottom number.
Oh, I
But
see.
but I don't know why you need to do that, but that's your choice.
Yeah,
Mm.
but then do we also vote on how we would want, like, let's just say, we vote on one of these 2 proposals, and then do we also vote on how we would fund it, or does that come
Yes.
later?
No, my recommendation is that you take the vote, that's why I like taking
I
the vote
see.
on the full number,
Yep,
because if that number fails, you don't have to need that second vote
Got
for
it.
funding. But if that vote passes, then you should take a second vote as to how you would fund it.
okay. So, I don't know, yeah, okay.
Alright, so to
So
cut
I
the
guess
impasse,
I'll
I guess,
entertain motions,
then
yeah.
I'll
So
make a
I'll-
motion, oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna take the first one and make a motion that we accept the budget at 41,897,577.
second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Mo
And Jeff
to
seconded.
go with this, and Jeff seconded it. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, so 4
4.
to go with that.
Okay, so it passes.
Actually, I think I'm gonna change mine, so we'll say 3 with that, so we'll have 3 with that. And
So,
then-
So we're
I'm trying to write
tied.
this down, so.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Okay.
So we're voting on the recommended budget of 41,897,577 that the
Right.
board of
Right.
Which does not
Selectmen
include the increase.
recommended,
Mhm.
and we have 3 in favor of that.
So now you have to see who's against it.
And how many against? So I think I'm against that.
4.
4.
So 4.
So then the motion fails. And that's what the
So
minutes
motion
say.
fails.
Do we
So-
now vote for the other amount, David, or just let it
Well,
go?
Now you
So-
vote whatever motion you want to vote, whether it's that other amount or something different, but
So
yes,
we
I would
could-
suggest that.
We could discuss another option. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right?
Sure.
So it could be 915 reduction, it could be a 500,000 reduction. It could be
Okay.
some other number that we could entertain. So I don't wanna just say,
Okay.
you know, it's one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if people have thoughts on something in the middle, or
If-
can we talk about that, or?
And if you have thoughts on something in the middle, what I would ask then is to take a motion and a vote specifically on the education budget, because
Mm.
that's the number I have to put in the book.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
So the
Jen, so-
school is asking for, is it this number 16,4?
Yes.
And, you know, that's a $1.2 million increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So do we come somewhere a little below that, but above, you know, I don't know, 7% instead of the 6%, or, you know,
so I'll make the
6.5%
motion that I
or
was
something?
originally going to move, and make
Okay.
the motion to approve the full amount at 42,168,627.
Okay, so we have a motion for that
Second.
from Scott,
Okay, 42.
and Jim seconded.
168.27. That was the,
168.27.
So all those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
So we got 3,
Okay, Scott.
3 in favor, and opposed,
Aye.
4.
So Jan, I
Could
didn't
be a
know how
long
you
night,
voted.
Tom.
It is gonna be a long night.
Did you say?
I don't know where we got. I feel like I'm in a jury selection here.
Well, I mean, I think this is a really difficult spot, right?
It is. It is.
So-
I mean, I think.
And I think we
What's the
need
amount you
to,
took
we
out,
need to
David?
think about
271.
the whole
271?
town.
271,050 to be exact.
050.
Go back to fire.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
want
Fund
so
the
we,
fire.
we need to think about the whole town. We need to think about, you know, the
Of
elderly
course, the
people's
older
tax
people.
bills. We need to think
Yeah,
about,
yep,
you know, the
mhm.
people moving in, people with kids, all these different competing
Mm.
priorities, right? We also have, which I haven't seen yet, I guess maybe I saw it last week, the capital,
Capital budget.
you know,
Yep.
stuff people wanna buy that's capital, right? In
Mhm.
nature, so we only have so much money, and we have to figure out what do we recommend to the town to
So I have a question. So
do with
if
that
we
money.
do this money, then they lose that. So exactly, who's looking for a vehicle that needs one? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Like,
no, that
No.
has nothing
Okay.
to do with it.
Capital
No,
budget.
What is the capital? What is on the capital budget then?
and so is it a good idea to talk about that, or not until next week?
Yeah.
So we fund it from 2 different mechanisms, but, you know, in full disclosure, I want to answer the questions. Basically, I don't have it in front of me, so if I forget something, I
That's what I'm
apologize.
trying to see if they
The
have.
Council on Aging is looking for a couple of smaller items, a copier machine and some new carpeting. The town clerk is looking for a copier. The DPW department is looking for a stump grinder, they need a new air compressor, and they need a new garage heating system
And
Yeah.
LED lighting.
and LED lighting.
Mm-hmm.
The fire department is looking for a fire truck pumper and a administrative vehicle for the chief.
So
The
there are some vehicles.
school department is looking for touch view panels that we discussed earlier. And our capital budget was approved by majority to give to buy a vehicle for the building inspector, but that was removed from the selectmen. They did not fund it.
Okay,
So, and
so
the
on
reason-
top of the 271,000, they want 100,000 for the touch screens also, and I know they're in the room. I feel like I'm in a show. We're right
Touchscreen,
here.
That was new technology,
Yeah,
That was fun.
yeah.
but that was funded from free cash.
That is the expectation at town meetings.
Okay.
To do with free cash.
So all those things you listed are already taken care of with the
More or
first
less.
free cash.
That would all be
Hasn't
free.
been voted
Except the
on
fire.
yet.
It hasn't been, yeah, it hasn't been voted.
It's been
Okay.
voted on by the capital budget committee, but
Okay.
it still needs to go
So
select.
we
Okay.
haven't reviewed it yet,
Selectmen
and the only
Okay.
reason I bring it up is because it's,
Well,
money.
yeah.
It's money, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it's an option to think about how we spend the capital budget. We
Mhm.
have, are we saying that we could fund all the capital ones that we think we want to fund?
Yes,
And still have 350,000
yes,
that we could fund the school?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. The idea is that, as I said earlier, was we were hoping to put that into the sidewalk fund.
Sidewalks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Um,
it's
so-
choices, right? It's all about choices.
Sidewalks will
Always
be
is,
out.
yeah,
It is choices.
always choices.
Okay, so
And-
all of that said,
And I
Yes.
only want to say this because I obviously have a board that I answer to.
Yeah.
You know, normally, we present to you what the board is voting on because they
Yeah.
have the exclusive right to place it on the warrant and to
Mhm.
determine how they want to be able to fund it, and then you guys make a recommendation on it. So, I hate us trying to spend free cash before the selectmen have actually taken their vote.
yeah.
But it is something that you make as a recommendation that I would have to bring back to them if that's what you
Mm.
so choose.
Okay.
Okay.
As I said, I did bring that up last night, so, you know, and they didn't direct me one way or the other.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, and I don't know if it's okay to ask this here, and we have a lot of representatives from the school, but I'm not sure if there's anything you feel you can do without. Like, can we meet somewhere in the middle? Like, is there really, I mean, I know you say over and over again, needs, but, you know, I'd like to understand it a little better. I mean, just, you know, what do you need and why do you need it? I know we went through your whole budget. Is there anything at all that's, you know, discretionary or questionable in it that maybe we could, you know, say, well, instead of, what was it, a $270,000 reduction, we, you know, split it in the middle or something?
271,
You live with.
050, is that right?
Right.
Mhm.
Keeping in
I mean,
mind,
if
Half
we
of that,
were-
half of that is 135, 525,
What percentage of the
or
budget is that?
do we just take
It's
away
1.4 if they're asking.
71,000 and give them 200,
Yeah, I mean,
which would be around three-quarters of
Remember, we're just
what was taken away by.
recommending.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
we're just recommending to the town. I mean,
Right.
we have to do
Town
something
is
that
gonna
we
listen
feel
or they
comfortable the
won't,
town
yeah.
can
Yeah.
live with, right?
I definitely
So
don't want
I
it to be
hear
no
about
tenants.
sidewalks. We have a lot of complaints about sidewalks, so,
Yeah.
it- you know,
Which is then also kids going to school. 'Cause
Correct.
No sidewalks, so.
right. I just, you know, it's a tough position to be in, right? So we're trying to, I'm just trying to get all the options out, and then we can just do one more vote and hopefully
Yeah.
call it a day.
So, in trying to answer your question, so, you know, in previous years, we know it's been just exactly what we could get, and David has worked with the school department to try and trim wherever we could.
Yeah.
We know that coming into it, and
Mhm.
so that's what we're presenting. The number might look bigger than you expect, but that is that trimmed budget, that's exactly
Yeah.
what we need. In order to cut something that's non-essential, we'd be looking at something like eliminating sports. We don't wanna do that. Everybody loves
Total?
sports.
In
No.
total?
Well, no, but the number hasn't been looked at, you know, it's just an arbitrary
Yeah, you're not gonna.
cut to try and make it match the rest of the town as the average increase over last year's budget, right?
But it's
Yeah.
a,
So
it's
we
a,
don't wanna do a thing like
That's a scare.
cutting something like sports. Everybody
Yeah.
loves it. Sports are a great thing for everybody in this town.
Well, and I
So
would
we
argue
can't-
it's part of their education, but.
Yeah, we can't say we'll eliminate a third grade teacher because we've got students that need a certain ratio of teachers to students.
Yeah.
And we can't say we'll eliminate the aides that work with kids with special needs because then we open up ourselves to a federal violation of federal law and a lawsuit.
And then we're also looking, I'm sorry, we're also looking at class sizes. You know, I'm sitting and thinking about my 6th grade daughter, whose class is upwards of 30 kids in her class.
I think about, that the inflation rate is, I don't know, was 6% or something, and, that's kind of what everybody else came in at, and trying to balance all the needs.
Would you give up the touchscreens for $100,000 back in the budget?
Honestly, I would
That's a good
love to
thought.
say yes, but in reality,
Yeah.
our elementary kids, it's so, behind the times with those. We have no interactive technology, and this is something that, although $95,000
Maybe
sounds
half
like
of
a
the
lot of
touch
money, it's gonna benefit 700+ students over the next 5 years, and it's tied to their instructional needs, and it's gonna
I
help
mean,
their
what
students.
are you doing
Yeah.
without them right now? You don't
Well-
have them now. What's
Yes.
the
Failing.
result of not having them right now?
So I can answer that. So, we actually didn't talk about this at our school committee meetings. We had a bunch of other things to talk about, but those touch screens, there is such an impact on how kids learn. I mean, they're interactive with the kids' Chromebooks. So right now, what we have is kids whose Chromebooks, they might be working on something on their Chromebook, but it's not interactive with the teacher unless they're using a Google Doc. There's an environmental impact because there's less copies being made because they're using the touch screen and they're interacting on their Chromebook. That's a budgetary impact. I mean, we're not running as many copies because they're using their Chromebooks and interacting with the teachers.
What, I don't,
It
How about a
interacts.
So
slow
we'll give them that,
integration of
It all
them?
integrates,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, but what about a slow integration of buying the screens, like, not all at once? Can you do it in like
is
a?
it like one screen you hang on the wall in a classroom?
The
one
65-inch
screen per ball.
touchdown, and what I can do is also through David, I can send you the 4-page document that we've created, that we shared with the capital budget committee to explain the needs, because the needs are there. It's not only, them sharing stuff in class, but they're sharing their work, they're editing their work. The teachers have been using these in their classrooms in terms of testing them out. We have professional development set to go if it's approved, so all teachers will be using it. It will change the way that they're teaching and make it a better learning environment for all of our kids. And again, 95,000, that's, roughly a teacher and a half or a teacher and an aide.
Yeah.
That's gonna be for 5, minimum 5 years, probably 5 to 10 years of instruction for 700 kids from preschool all the way up.
You think you're gonna
to
get 5 to 10 years out of a touchscreen?
Preschool's not getting these,
Absolutely.
That's the choice.
am I
What's that,
correct?
Jim?
That's what they want.
Preschool or not?
Yep.
They give that.
I was told they were not getting.
I believe they are.
I was
In
told
the
they were
40,
not.
15, 30, there's 5, there's 15
Can't
in
have
each.
it all.
Howard and Roselle, that's
Yeah,
30.
yeah, to
Well, I
give up
think
the
they
teacher
don't
the
like
screen.
preschool because they're under the impression they're not getting them.
Exactly.
So-
Check our numbers, I believe they are.
So,
Because
Take it
that would
from
leave
one
us
who
10,
knows.
We need
we only
three
have 5.
for
I already heard.
The message
My
is
husband was a
filtered down.
firefighter.
so I just wanna kind of regroup the group here,
Please.
okay? So, after all that discussion,
Yes.
we have another motion about funding either one of these numbers or a different number.
Okay.
I think it was a question.
Oh. I'm like, okay. I'm on vacation mode. I leave
Or we
tomorrow
can
morning at 4
We
a.m.
can re-vote on the two, that we already did.
Thinking about the boards.
Look at,
The boards.
I
are funded.
would try to steer you away from having a capital budget conversation at this point.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
warrant articles are not in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I would ask, again, you guys can choose, I'm just making a recommendation, but I think that we should probably steer clear of that conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
And,
All right, let's take that off the table then.
Excuse me, Jessica Holt.
So do we wanna try to re-vote on one of these two options, or is there another number that we wanna try to deal with?
What's your number, David? 9 what?
9.
9:15, 5:36.
9:15 what?
He's not answering that because it's
9:15,
not.
so what? I don't-
No.
I didn't mean that directly. I mean, what was
No, I think,
The
I
difference
think
is
it's the
271,050,
6%.
which is
Nine
it's
15.
1.13.
536.
It's-
536.
So if we take the selectmen's recommendation, it's 1.4 or 1.
No, the selectmen are recommending,
The lower
I mean,
amount.
it's
Lower
lower by
amount.
1.4.
no, it's
No,
lower by
by-
200,000,
Right.
207.
Yes, but I'm saying the percentage.
1.3%.
Nobody's gonna think we
Oh,
know
yeah,
what
sorry.
you're here.
1.3,
1.3,
yeah,
just wanted to make that clear.
Mhm.
yeah, which, you know, on a big budget, 1%, it's not, you know. I worry because this budget goes up so much every year,
Yes.
more than all the other departments.
Does it, it's going to
It's
be.
gonna keep
And,
going
and,
over.
and,
It's gonna
and,
keep going up.
and the, I mean, I did vote, like, but not to hit taxes. But another department gave up. This happened last year too, where another department decided not to take their raises, and then somebody else didn't. So,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
know we took money out of stabilization to fund the school requests, and, you know, we've done this, we've tried every single year to really fund the schools with what they ask for and
Mhm.
what they say they need. It's just getting larger every single year,
It's going to,
and
it's
But it
going to, you
can't.
can't stop it.
Well,
you're gonna have
You
to.
don't fund
It-
it.
I mean,
I can move.
well,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll be
you-
with
I
you.
mean, when you're
Again.
retired.
But you know what, I checked the
It's an
taxes in May,
option.
it's not much different than here.
but again, our role is to be, you know,
Fair.
make a responsible recommendation to the
Right.
town. The town ultimately decides, so at the end of the day, you know, we're just saying,
We're just advising.
we just think
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you know, we're trying to be responsible with the funds that we
Yeah.
have available. So, no one's against anybody, no one's trying to, you know,
No,
say
no,
anything's
We don't
bad,
have
or
everything.
not,
No,
not
we're just
even
trying to
saying
figure
that
it
it's
out.
not needed, it's just what we can afford, like everybody does in their household
We're
every single
not just
day.
thinking of the students, we have to think of the whole town and the essence of safety for firefighters. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a safety issue when we talk about firefighters and reduced staff.
Mhm.
I mean, and everybody has a need and everybody has a want, in the sense of they wanna keep everybody safe and they wanna educate everybody to the best of their ability.
Everyone advocates for their own budget.
Well, and that's reasonable.
Yeah.
That's what they
It's
should
just
do.
School committee's job.
That's
Right.
their
I mean,
job,
they're
yeah.
here doing what they're
And
tasked to
that's-
do.
But if we
Right.
go
But
to
I
a
think-
half, if we start going a half, we're gonna go back and say, we'll give you half a firefighter, or?
Well, no, I think we put the firefighter in bed because he
Yeah,
said he's
yes,
comfortable with
yes.
2 and not 3, so I
But-
think,
But
He's
they did
probably
give
not
up.
that comfortable. But he's comfortable.
Now,
But
Yeah,
not
but we
here.
put it to bed.
he's in agreement, he's in agreement.
Yeah.
He's
Maybe
in agreement.
reluctantly, but
It
he's
might not
agreed.
be next year, but he is this year, so.
So does somebody wanna make another motion with either one of these numbers or some different number? Because we have, I think we have to come to some kind of a consensus, right?
if we,
It would be nice.
Yeah.
You have to read the
Yeah.
motion
I
at
would like to
town
go to bed
meeting.
tonight,
Yeah.
I
Make
still
a
have something
motion
to do.
again to
take
accept.
your calculator out
Yeah.
Take the
you can
915,
put whatever
536.
motion you want.
and add 200, I wanna check my number.
Straight
I suck at
200,
adding.
200,000,
Excuse my
Jim?
French.
200,000, $200?
200. Yeah, $200.
$200 pennies.
$200. That'll go in.
I might get your raise.
That'll go in
I
my-
got other stuff
Total
here, I'm
coverage
sorry,
is
Jim.
what?
So I think, are you coming in more like 7% instead of the 6 and not the 8?
Yeah.
I think he was just doing a round number.
1115, 536.
Oh, I did do it right. Yeah, how about that?
Oh, there you go.
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on the school budget at $1,115,536, which is a deduction of $71,050, and hopefully they can make ends meet with that number versus losing all of the 2%. This is probably only losing, what do we figure, 3%? Around that?
So,
I'm sorry?
I'll
I
second
I
the
was gonna ask,
motion.
okay, so I was waiting for this. I'm sorry.
I'll second the motion, I know what he's
So
saying.
where would you recommend that $200,000 difference come from?
Oh, yeah, do we have to do that in this motion too, or does
Well,
that second motion?
I thought,
Well, hold on, I think this is now the debate. So he has a question about the motion.
Yeah,
But you are not making a decision on where it's going to come from.
Yes.
It is part of his calculation as to whether or not he supports the vote or not vote. So it's just part of the debate.
okay,
Mm.
okay.
But you're not gonna make that motion or
Oh,
vote until after this vote is taken. I wanna make sure that I'm clear though, because
we're really voting on a budget and not a budget reduction.
Okay.
So, let me just,
Good increase.
522.
Yes.
Still
Yeah,
an
I didn't go to the
Yeah.
total.
That's okay, that's all right, that's what I'm,
That's what I thought.
that's okay. 16,
So the,
45,
So you were, so it's adding the 200,000, gee, that's,
0.56. So that means that the school budget
mm-hmm,
would be 16,374,472. If somebody else wants to check that math, because I would ask if Jim wouldn't mind amending his motion to actually represent the budget number that we would be using.
oh,
The 15 million.
Oh.
Or the
No.
total budget number.
Total budget, so the
oh, the
total,
total number.
so if you
I
add,
see.
if you, basically what you're doing is you're adding $200,000. So
Should be
To this number here, the 42,117?
374,472.
that's what I have.
Yes.
So
What do you have?
16,
Sorry.
you know, you're on the board, you go.
16,000,
16 million.
16,374,472.
476?
472.
472.
So
did
I
you
would,
get that on the bottom?
I haven't done that part yet.
Okay.
So that's the new school budget based on what I just
That is correct.
announced.
That is adding $200,000. So what I would ask is if you could have your motion represent that you were making a motion to fund the school department at $16,374,472. And then once there is second, you would explain that that means that you were adding $200,000 back into their budget.
Yeah.
And then there would be
Okay,
debate.
okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we change the school budget to $16,374,472, which increases it by what I suggest is 200,000 from the 915,536 to 1.115,536, with a total budget, once again, of $16,374,472. Does that sound better?
Sure.
I'll second it then.
Okay,
And what does that look like as a percentage increase?
it's around 7, I think.
It's still
Are we talking about in half?
still around 1%.
That's math, yeah.
In half, that's more than half.
It's a little over, yeah,
Okay.
it's more than half.
You're saying it's 1%
Like
of the
Bridgewater.
whole budget?
Again, so
Yeah.
I'm getting a little, so instead of giving the full 271.50, you're suggesting 200,000.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Because the 271.50 is 1.2 of their budget, so yours is probably 70% of it.
Point, yeah.
So we're talking a 7% increase?
It's
Mhm.
late,
Yeah.
ain't that late.
Yeah.
7.3%.
That's a 7.3% increase over last year.
7.2 over last year.
So,
7.2 or 7.3?
7.3.
Okay.
Versus 7.8.
Okay, so we had a first and a second. Any discussion, or do you wanna take a vote?
Oh.
So if you want to ask that question now, you could ask that question as part of debate, or you can talk, that's your choice.
That, you just pick that number, doesn't, nothing backing it up, you just like it, or,
Can I use my experience with the school for 15 years?
I mean, you're just pulling the
What,
number.
let me ask you a question of Mark. What are your athletic fees right now?
$250. One flat
For a year?
for a year. So whether it's like one sport or three sports.
And how many students do you approximately have that are in in all of the fields of athletics?
It ranges somewhere probably between 300 and 400.
Okay, so if you were to raise that, and I know everybody hates to think this, and we hated it back in the day, by, $25 or $50, I know it's still a lot cheaper than all the surrounding towns, and with that would probably make up most of the money that we're taking away, so to speak, the 70,000.
Why would you cut sports? There's a million other.
No, he's
We're not
not
cutting
saying,
it.
he's telling
No,
him
you're
to
increasing it.
increase-
I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that.
Increase the fees.
increase the fees that they're
That's the
paying.
least
Just a different tax.
popular decision.
Yeah.
An
I
increase
know
of,
it is,
an
but
increase
better
of
than
$50
Yeah.
would be about 15,000 to 20,000, depending on the number of students. We also do have waivers for students who are free and reduced lunch, who can't afford to pay, or with special
Yeah, you have a lot,
circumstances.
I know that.
If you raise it $100, and you're doubling that, and, you know, we more than likely, to make up that difference, have to go up, probably double, about $250, go from $250 to $500.
Yeah, I
To
wouldn't
make
Yeah,
that,
tell them
make
we're
that
gonna get it.
70,000 difference.
That's
for-
gonna make up a little bit.
Full disclosure.
I wouldn't wanna see it go double, we've
That's for
discussed
them
this
to
over the
do.
years, it's always.
That's what the
That's-
towns do, that's what they go after, because you
Well,
can't,
most towns go after per sport,
if they need money.
But
they
it's
go
up to
after
the
that.
school to decide how they
Right.
want to make up that difference.
yes.
And,
I'm just,
So did
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
a question about,
My question was just more how it would be suggested that additional $200,000 gets funded.
I would
Which
like
is
to
the
see it
next.
come out of free cash,
free cash?
if I.
So,
Can I ask one quick question? What would come up where we might need free cash? What if we had no free cash?
Coffee?
Potable water?
we didn't have any.
The
So
water,
again,
yeah, the
we've-
water thing might,
I think the town has done a really, really nice job, and when I say the town, I mean everybody. The Board of Selectmen, hopefully myself, the Finance Committee, town meeting, department heads. Everybody's done a really good job, residents, of recognizing we have to have continuous infrastructure improvements on an annual basis.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than owning a home and never putting an investment back into it, and then 12 years later, you're like, I can't afford all of this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because we went 12 years without doing anything. So we've done a nice job with that. Obviously, if we don't have free cash, there are some infrastructure improvements, whether it's just vehicles or other items, we wouldn't be able to do. But I can't
or you
tell you
have to borrow for,
where you have to borrow.
and the cost of borrowing's going up,
That is
Mhm.
correct.
at least right now.
And I think that's my issue, Mo. You know, at the end of the day, the free cash, I get that it's there, but if you look at capital budget, what was going to be, there's a lot of, small engines and heat and lights and vehicles
boards.
and the boards that we can obviously pay cash with, but more importantly, not have a borrowing rate against it, which ultimately we're paying, 3, 4, 5% more.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in favor of going up on the taxes any more
Yeah.
than we absolutely
But
have.
we're headed,
Mhm.
we'll see.
Any more than we absolutely have
I
to.
mean, the water bill's gonna be a tax.
Well, that's true, yeah, and, the water's a whole separate issue. We
Mhm.
could talk all night about that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but we're not going to.
Anyway.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
So,
Oh, wait a minute, hold on.
sorry.
I'll stay with the eye.
So we got 3 ayes
Sure.
with that,
3 ayes.
and 4 noes.
Okay. So where does it go now? Do we have to make another motion?
Yep.
Oh, Jesus.
It's not gonna happen.
This is not gonna help. All right.
You had one of these go too many?
I have
We're
to
not
leave at
going to
9.
tonight
so-
either.
It's only
I mean, we
No,
haven't
look,
really
Yeah,
had
I just
this
have to leave
kind
at
of,
9,
No, we have
that's
not.
all.
we haven't run, well, since
So
I've
the
been
answer
on
is
the
no.
board, 5 years.
Guess
Yeah,
the
they
answer
have.
is no here.
We've always, tried to find a way to
Mhm.
make everybody happy.
I mean, I'd be willing to go up 100,000 if you could get along without the boards. And that way, it would seem like that's a sacrifice.
Half of it's
Yeah, but-
135,
We,
Mm-hmm.
we'd have to
Yeah,
have,
half of the money that's been deducted.
we'd have to have a discussion about that when we talk about the capital budget items, whether we
Yeah.
recommend those or not, right?
Right, that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
And it's not our job to tell them how they spend the money.
But
We
yeah,
just
again,
give them a
yeah,
budget.
But you
we're
can make a
recommending.
motion, you can make a motion.
But with the capital budgets,
Yeah,
is
but
it,
David said we should stay away
if
from
you're
it.
Yeah.
voting on the, David, so
And
if
I
it's
fully
voted
agree
on the
with him.
capital budgets, do they have to spend that money, like, so if they come, just for anybody, they come for capital budgets and they can't then
Use it for
intertwine?
something else?
They
Thank you.
cannot.
No.
Okay.
They have to spend it on what they're.
Okay.
just curious.
We vote
For all
them on-
budgets, I was
if
just
the-
asking.
If the town votes to buy a Maserati, they have to buy a Maserati.
I wanna drive it then.
So where are we at? We have no agreement on anything?
No
We don't have
agreement,
any
no.
agreement on this budget proposal.
Janice,
no?
you just had to say yes.
I beg your pardon?
You just had to say yes an hour ago.
I have to say that?
I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to horse trade or not. It probably isn't, right?
No, so what you can do is make a
Another
motion
motion.
on a different number. Or we can go back to the original two numbers that we had and vote on those again.
I'll go back to the original
Okay.
budget and make a motion. We accept the budget at 41,897,577.
Okay.
That's the original number.
That's the original number.
Like the
school-
total
Yeah.
budget.
So all in favor of that? Oh, sorry, I need a second first.
Second.
Yeah, I have a question though, if we vote on that, then can the town come in and say, no, we're gonna use the extra
Yes,
cash?
of course, the
Yeah.
town
Yeah,
can
I mean, this
do
is,
what they
wanted-
I mean,
I
at
just
the end of
want-
the day, we're just
We
making
just
a
recommend.
recommendation.
Okay,
The
correct.
town meeting decides
Okay.
everything.
I'm gonna let the town decide.
And in
so I'm
fairness
gonna
to
say
the
yes.
school committee, they're,
Let the
they
town
always
decide
have.
what they wanna do with the money.
That's a good
They'll
idea.
have, you
Yeah,
know,
let the
they'll
town
have discussion
decide.
at town meetings.
Oh, yeah.
believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be
So
there for
second.
3 days.
Yeah. Well, now we
So
don't have,
we have a
according to
first
Annie, we
and a
don't have
second.
tickets
All
anymore.
those in favor of going to the original 41,897,577?
Aye.
I'm gonna do I, let the town decide.
5 to 2. All those opposed?
No.
2. Okay. So, do we leave it at that?
We do.
We do. Okay, so we're gonna go
Probably
with
the
the
best
original,
answer, yeah.
what the Board of
Let the
Selectmen
town decide if they
felt
really want it.
and what
Do
David
with the
recommended
raises, so.
is a 6% increase over last year's spending
Mhm.
for the school department, and that's what we're gonna recommend to the town.
And they might just say yes. Can the town decide if
Sure.
they use taxes or free cash?
I don't know, I'm gonna say no. What they should
Okay.
be doing is they should just vote on the budget.
Okay.
And then, in the fall, what we can do is we can go back, once we start to crunch all the numbers, we can go back in the fall and we can say how we're going to fund it.
And who
Okay.
makes that decision at that point?
Board of
The
Selectmen.
board.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
Board of Selectmen would bring it, but then the town's gonna make a decision how they wanna vote on it.
Okay, so they still have to vote if they'll do taxes or free cash.
No, if, like, for
Oh.
example, if our growth comes in a little bit higher, or somebody else comes in a little, we might still only have to raise it 2.5. We won't know until the fall.
Okay.
But when we have a fall town meeting, then we can place it back on, and the selectmen can say, we wanna use free cash to make up this difference. Because if they don't put the warrant on, it can't be voted on.
Mm-hmm.
So if they choose to put the warrant on, then the town can make a decision as to how they wanna fund it.
Okay.
Okay, well, that was a
And-
lot.
And I will tell you this, I am gonna check with legal counsel on it. I just, could town meeting say we wanna transfer X amount of dollars from free cash to make up the difference? The answer might be yes, but I
Okay.
don't know if it's
And
necessary
we
at
did
that
something a
point.
couple of years ago.
We did.
It was with town
No, we
and,
did.
and it was, the
We-
sidewalks, I think.
No, it was, we took money out of stabilization to fund raises.
Oh,
So,
okay, that's right, that's right.
But we had already placed it on, because we were
It was already on.
it was a matter of adjusting the number, but it
Okay.
was already a warrant article to take money out of stabilization.
Okay.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that's what I'm a little bit worried about too, is we already depleted our savings a little bit that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then with,
Mhm.
you know, things that are coming, with it, you know, talk of a new school and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and we don't know, I mean, the water's fine for now, but we know that that
The-
has to be addressed, and
Yeah, the
if something
water's-
goes wrong immediately.
Yeah, a lot of people would argue the water's not so fine, but
Oh,
we
yeah.
won't get into
You
that.
go
here.
on to the West Bridgewater
And go to
page,
the
you'll
water
see how many yellow
department
posts
and
there
debate it
is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, what else do we have to do tonight?
The only other thing
Oh,
that, we put a vote on
message.
message for FinCom book, but technically under that heading, what you normally do is that you appoint someone, usually the chair.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No, we appreciate it, and I hope you understand the
Yes. No, we
difficulties.
do. Thank you, thank you very much.
I think they gotta gather their people and get them to the,
Okay, so, I think we took a vote for me to draft it, and then we review it or something, right? Is that what we did?
Yes, that is correct.
Do you guys want?
So you would normally appoint someone,
obviously,
usually it's the chair.
Someone else can draft it, I'm happy about that.
No, that's okay.
Do you wanna do it?
No, Rosie's means you don't do it. Means you don't do it.
Oh, okay. See, I don't even
Jeff
know
was like
the
sinking under
signals.
the carpet over there.
Good thing I'm not a third base coach.
Yeah, you would go home.
Yeah, right.
There's one thing I do want to say, because I'm remiss if I don't say this. I have continuously said that this budget is what the Board of Selectmen approved, and that is
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
However, it was by majority vote. It was 2-1, it was not unanimous.
Oh, okay.
So I should have said that earlier, I apologize. I just referred to it as the board, but I do want to make sure that you're
Okay.
aware
Yeah.
that it was by majority vote, it was not by
Yeah,
unanimous.
same here. So,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
and it's,
And the one
it's
issue was the school. Everything
Yeah.
else was approved unanimously, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And it's
So
re-
was the school that
It
was
it
a
was the
sticker?
school, that's correct.
Yeah.
So
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 put
it
it
was
at
the
the taxpayers and
And it's
let them
quite
decide.
reluctantly that I just can't,
But I think let the taxpayers decide.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if David had come in and said, we've got, you know, for discussion, plenty of revenue,
yeah.
then it's not an issue.
Yeah.
We-
Yeah.
Or if
You
we
know,
were
I
further
feel,
along.
honestly, I feel our back's against the wall with the Prop 2.5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if
Obviously
we were
for-
further along on the development of the Lincoln Street and we knew that we were gonna have like
Yeah.
a boatload of cash coming
This
in,
is
that
just,
would
this
be
is
We're
just,
there now.
this is what you do when you don't have enough money.
Right.
Unfortunately, cuts have to take
It's
place.
not easy.
And you
No.
can't
It's
keep
not
raising
easy.
taxes on people, you just,
No, I've been
you
walking
know.
around talking to
Can we
people
go
and
back
everybody's
to
screaming about
Why
it.
we
Yeah.
kiss the car
Yeah.
over?
Pardon?
So, I'll just address that real quickly.
I didn't hear that.
It's not on, it'll be for capital budgets next time. But there was a vote to place the warrant articles on the warrant. And so the selectmen go through it individually. They placed all the warrants on except for the truck. That was not unanimous either. That was a 2-1 vote.
Truck, oh, the fire
What?
truck,
No, I'm sorry, I thought you were referring to the building inspector's vehicle.
oh.
vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. So that was not unanimous either. It was 2-1. And it was voted to not place it on. But again, that was not unanimous.
Now, does the building inspector already have a vehicle?
Yeah, he's using an old car.
So he's using an old
I
car,
thought that's what
so-
we talked
This is
about.
his third year trying to get a vehicle.
So Mary's argument is that it was an older vehicle, it was time to replace it. And the other two people, so she voted to place it on the warrant, and then the other two selectmen felt otherwise, and they voted to not place it on the
And
warrant.
remind me how old that car is?
It's a 2011.
Yeah,
It
the
was a police
argument
car.
being that everyone else in town's got brand-new vehicles except him,
Okay.
but they said that's the culture.
I think it's more than that.
I do too. I
It's
agree
more
with
than that.
As to why he's not getting it?
I don't know why he's not getting it, but that car is old, and then he's probably due, but I'm sure they have other reasons why they did what they did, but I don't think it's just because he's looking for a new
Maybe.
vehicle.
The recommendation, I think Denise had said was to, fund.
No, I get,
Well,
I get
No,
why
but to
they're
get
doing what they're doing.
to get another police car going again as a
absolutely.
choice.
Yeah.
There was
And we
also a
needed fire
discussion
truck,
that-
right? A fire
And you and I agreed that,
pumper truck.
if you're coming in looking for a car, in the same breath, and I think, David, you agree with this also, which you and I don't agree very often, that,
Ouch.
we both
I mean,
admit it
everyone
to
else
each
has
other.
got them.
He also doesn't
Um,
like working with his wife.
You don't come in looking for a car and then tell us you're gonna keep the old one for somebody else to use it.
Well, that
Oh.
was said.
We had
Yeah,
a problem with that. Am I
that's
correct or am I
problematic.
incorrect?
No,
That was said.
that was sad, and that's.
We all looked at each other kinda funny.
Okay.
Okay.
So, do you want me to try to draft a FinCom message?
Sure.
You did a beautiful job last year, Janet.
You can make a motion to
We
do
could
that.
talk
I'll make a
about-
motion to have
Janet
Chairperson
eloquently.
Janet Fox write the soliloquy for our FinCom
Do I have a
booklet.
second?
I'll second it.
We'll all second
gotta
it.
I'll
write that
second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, I will do my utmost best. Can we do that through email, or do we have to bring it next week?
I think
or-
you did it through email last time,
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
or the year before when I was involved.
I'll draft
Before my
it.
mother died.
I usually draft it and send it, I think, to everybody here, and, or you look at it first. I
No,
don't know.
yeah, usually you would just draft it, send it, we would work on it, and then we would bring it to the full committee.
Yeah.
And that way they would review it at their next meeting.
And what was the picture? Did we do? Oh, the new, no,
Yeah.
the,
200.
yes.
Speaking of which, when is the next meeting?
The next meeting will be August 20th.
April.
I'm sorry.
Good.
April.
That's a long
I did it 3 times today.
Okay.
The only reason I recognize
I don't
that-
have a problem with August 20th. I have no problem at all with August 20th.
Exactly.
April
Um,
20th, and
Oh,
we'll
and I
do
have
the,
to say
we'll
I am
review the
here.
message, we will talk about the capital budget items and all the other warrant articles,
That is
correct?
correct, and that's why I was trying to not speak a lot about the capital budget
Yeah,
items,
I
because they'll
know.
be on that
Yeah.
agenda.
I had questions.
And,
I had
um,
questions.
I know,
capital
it's
budget.
just, it is money though, that's, you know.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yeah, it's still $1 million in the capital budget, 1.1, something like that, so.
Yeah, and I struggle with, like you're saying, you gotta keep your infrastructure, there's just so many competing priorities and it's just not easy. It's not easy.
I mean, to not be lost,
To be responsible,
it was a
you know?
$900,000 increase in the
It
budget.
is. It's
a
huge.
significant increase in a budget.
It's the
Yeah.
biggest increase
And
I've
they're going
seen.
for $100,000 boards.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this. I know
And,
it's on the capital budget, but
Gotta let
really,
go of the
it's
boards.
already,
Gotta let go of those boards.
and.
you get a
um,
what?
Let go of the boards, let it go.
I know, yeah.
It's okay.
No, but,
Let go of what?
you can make an argument
He
that
wants me to
it's a
stop
$1 million
talking about it. He
increase
sounds
for
like
the
my
school.
husband.
Yep.
I'm in favor of the boards, to be clear, but it's $1 million increase for the school.
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm just saying,
exactly.
just keep the capital budget in our budget. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
again, it still goes to the people. Don't
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
about it.
No, I don't mind them getting the boards, but it is still, they went 2 places.
No one was jumping.
They
Well,
did-
that, every department goes 2
They have
places.
to have
I mean, you've got highway department with multiple requests.
Yeah.
The fire department has a budget, and it's
Yeah.
$800,000 for the pumper truck. that they're
Yeah.
in. So, I mean, there's a bunch to discuss, but.
Yeah, that's a lot too.
But that's-
We can talk about that next, on the 20th.
Well, we
Okay.
knew these days were coming, it was just a matter of, we're fortunate we have such a great
Well,
commercial
and the town
tax
came out
base.
and they supported them last year, or the year before with their raises, so maybe they'll come out again and support them with their
The school
budget.
committee has the best communication with the taxpayers.
Oh,
Yeah,
They will,
oh, yeah,
they will certainly make their case.
yeah.
as long as they don't have paper airplanes to throw at us, we're okay.
Okay, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Oops, I gotta write that
Second.
down.
Yep, write that down.
Don't miss that.
8:19.
8:19, okay.
Oh, you doing the minutes again?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, sorry,
Whoever.
Cheryl.
That's
All those
okay.
in favor?
I
Any
hate women.
opposed? Okay,
No.
we're out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.